In the misty embrace of Harrington Manor, 1935, chandeliers cast golden light over a jubilant feast. Captain Reginald Harrington, aviator hero, raised his champagne flute, his moustache sharp as his fame. To new horizons, he boomed, glasses clinking in echo. Guests, his elegant wife, rival pilot and cunning journalist, smiled tightly. Then a gasp. Harrington clutched his throat, the flute shattering as he fell. Was it the champagne, or a darker design? The manor's opulent halls turned sinister, secrets lurking in the fog. Only one mind could unravel this deadly toast. Hercule Poirot's. Chapter 1. The Celebratory Toast. The autumn of 1935 draped Harrington Manor in a shroud of mist, its grey stone facade looming over the rolling hills of the English countryside. The manor, a relic of Georgian splendour, stood as a testament to the Harrington family's storied wealth, its ivy-clad walls whispering of secrets held for generations. Tonight, however, the air thrummed with a different energy. Celebration. Captain Reginald Harrington, the nation's darling aviator, had returned from a triumphant transatlantic flight, his name emblazoned across every newspaper from London to Liverpool. His daring had eclipsed even the feats of his rival, Amelia Croft, and the manor's dining hall buzzed with anticipation for a toast to his victory. The hall itself was a marvel of opulence, its vaulted ceiling adorned with frescoes of cherubs and clouds, as if mocking the mortal skies Harrington had conquered. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow, their prisms scattering light across the polished mahogany table, set for a select gathering of guests. The table gleamed with silver cutlery, fine bone china, and flutes of champagne that sparkled like liquid starlight. The scent of roasted pheasant and freshly cut roses mingled with the faint tang of wax from the candelabras, creating an atmosphere both festive and intimate. Outside, the wind howled softly, rattling the leaded windows as if jealous of the warmth within. At the head of the table stood Captain Reginald Harrington himself, a man whose presence commanded the room as effortlessly as he piloted his aeroplane. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a moustache as sharp as the propeller blades of his beloved Sky Falcon, he exuded a charisma that bordered on theatrical. His dark eyes gleamed with the thrill of victory, and his tailored dinner jacket, pressed to perfection, bespoke a man accustomed to admiration. He raised his champagne flute, the bubbles catching the light, and surveyed his guests with a smile that was both gracious and triumphant. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice resonant, carrying the cadence of a man who had addressed crowds and cockpits alike. "Tonight we celebrate not merely a flight, but a triumph of the human spirit over the vast, unyielding skies. To new horizons." The guests echoed his toast, their voices a chorus of enthusiasm. "To new horizons." Glasses clinked, a delicate symphony of crystal, as the assembled sipped their champagne. There was Lady Evelyn Harrington, his wife, radiant in a sapphire gown that hugged her slender frame, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her smile, though warm, seemed to falter at the edges, as if touched by some unspoken unease. Beside her sat Victor Langford, Harrington's business partner, a portly man with a florid complexion and shrewd eyes that darted about the room. His toast was hearty, but his fingers gripped his glass a touch too tightly. Across the table, Amelia Croft, the rival pilot whose record Harrington had surpassed, leaned back in her chair with a defiant air. Her leather aviator's jacket, worn despite the formal setting, marked her as an outsider to this world of decorum, her bobbed hair and sharp cheekbones lending her an almost predatory grace. She raised her glass with a sardonic smile, her eyes locked on Harrington as if challenging him even now. Jenkins, the butler, stood unobtrusively near the sideboard, his gaunt face impassive as he poured another round of champagne with the precision of a metronome. His grey hair and stooped posture belied a quiet strength, his hands steady despite years of service. Finally, there was Harold Bates, a journalist from the Daily Clarion, his notebook tucked discreetly beside his plate, his sly grin hinting at stories yet to be written. Harrington took a deep sip of his champagne, savouring the moment. His guests followed suit, their eyes on him, the hero of the hour. The room seemed to hold its breath, the clinking of glasses fading into a pregnant silence. Then, without warning, Harrington's smile froze. His free hand flew to his throat, his fingers clawing at the air as a strangled gasp tore from his lips. The flute slipped from his grasp, shattering on the parquet floor in a spray of glass and golden liquid. His knees buckled, and he collapsed, his body crumpling like a marionette with its strings cut. A scream pierced the air, Evelyn's high and sharp, shattering the decorum. "Reginald!" she cried, rushing to his side, her gown pooling around her as she knelt. Langford leapt to his feet, knocking over his chair, his face ashen. "Good God, what's happened?" Amelia's glass remained poised mid-air, her expression unreadable, while Jenkins stepped forward, his calm demeanour cracking for the first time. Bates, ever the opportunist, scribbled furiously in his notebook, his eyes darting between the chaos and the body on the floor. "Someone fetch a doctor!" Langford bellowed, though his voice trembled. Jenkins moved swiftly to the telephone, his hands shaking as he dialed. Evelyn cradled her husband's head, her tears falling onto his lifeless face. No, it can't be. Reginald, please!" Her words dissolved into sobs, the sound raw and wrenching. The other guests stood frozen, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and, perhaps, guilt. The air grew heavy, the chandelier's glow now casting eerie shadows across the room. The champagne, so recently a symbol of triumph, now seemed tainted, its bubbles hissing faintly in the spilled remnants on the floor. Was it the drink itself? A poison slipped into the hero's glass? Or something more sinister, orchestrated by one of the faces now staring in horror? The manor, once a beacon of celebration, had transformed into a stage for tragedy, its walls closing in like the jaws of a trap. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard would later arrive, his trench coat dripping from the rain that had begun to lash the windows. He would note the faint almond-like scent in Harrington's glass, a hallmark of cyanide, swift and merciless. But in this moment, as the guests stood paralyzed, the truth remained elusive, a puzzle as intricate as the frescoes overhead. Who among them had motive to end the aviator's life? The wife whose grief seemed too perfect? The partner whose financial ties were strained? The rival whose pride had been bruised? The butler whose loyalty might mask desperation? Or the journalist whose pen was as sharp as any blade? The wind howled louder, rattling the panes as if urging the truth to surface. The dining hall, once alive with laughter, now held only the echo of a fatal toast, and the promise of a mystery that would demand a mind as brilliant as Hercule Poirot's to unravel. The little Belgian detective, with his fastidious moustache and unmatched grey cells, was yet to arrive, but his presence loomed like a beacon in the gathering storm. For now, the question hung in the air, as palpable as the mist outside. Who had turned triumph into tragedy? Chapter 2. The Shadow of Suspicion. The dawn broke over Harrington Manor with a reluctant greyish light, as though the sun itself hesitated to illuminate the tragedy within. The mist that clung to the English countryside seemed thicker now, curling around the manor's ivy-clad walls like a shroud, muffling the world beyond. Inside, the dining hall remained untouched, a frozen tableau of the previous night's horror. Shattered glass, overturned chairs, and the faint, acrid scent of cyanide lingering in the air. The once gleaming chandelier light now cast a pallor over the scene, its glow dimmed by the weight of death. Word of Captain Reginald Harrington's collapse had spread like wildfire through the village, and by first light, the gravel drive crunched under the wheels of a black police car. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard stepped out, his trench coat sodden from the persistent drizzle, his face set in a grimace that spoke of too many sleepless nights. A burly man with a no-nonsense air, Japp was no stranger to crime. Yet the sudden demise of a national hero like Harrington unsettled even him. He adjusted his hat, squinting at the manor's imposing facade. "A fine mess this is," he muttered to the constable trailing him, a young man named Willis, who clutched a notebook with nervous zeal. Japp's boots echoed on the flagstone floor as he entered, his eyes sweeping the dining hall. The table, still set for the ill-fated toast, held a dozen champagne flutes, their contents now evidence. One glass, Harrington's, lay in fragments, its rim dusted with a faint residue that confirmed the coroner's initial report. Cyanide, swift and lethal, administered mere moments before the sip. Japp knelt beside the spot where Harrington had fallen, his gloved hand hovering over the spilled champagne that had dried into a sticky stain. "Poison in the glass, not the bottle," he said to Willis, who scribbled furiously. The killer was precise. Had to be someone close enough to tamper without being seen. He rose, brushing his hands, and turned his attention to the drawing room, where the suspects had been gathered by the local police. The room, with its heavy velvet curtains and walnut-panelled walls, felt stifling despite the chill seeping through the windows. A fire crackled in the hearth, but it did little to warm the atmosphere of suspicion that hung over the assembled. Lady Evelyn Harrington sat nearest the fire, her slender frame enveloped in a black lace dress that seemed to absorb the light. Her auburn hair, usually so meticulously styled, was slightly dishevelled, and her eyes, red-rimmed from weeping, darted nervously as Japp entered. "Inspector," she said, her voice trembling yet refined, "how could this happen? Reginald was in perfect health. He was the picture of vitality." She clutched a handkerchief, its embroidered edges crumpled, and dabbed at her eyes. Japp noted the performance. Grief, yes, but was it genuine? Widows, in his experience, often hid more than they revealed. Victor Langford stood by the window, his broad shoulders hunched as he stared into the fog. The business partner's florid face was flushed, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his tweed suit as if to still their trembling. "This is a disaster," he said, turning to Japp. "Reginald and I had a venture, a new seaplane design. His death ruins everything." His voice carried a bitter edge, and Japp's eyes narrowed. Financial ruin was a motive as old as time, and Langford's agitation suggested more than mere grief. "Were you close to the deceased?" Japp asked, his tone deceptively mild. Langford hesitated. "Close enough in business, but we had our disagreements." Across the room, Amelia Croft lounged in an armchair, her leather aviator's jacket a stark contrast to the room's elegance. Her bobbed hair framed a face that was all sharp angles and defiance, her grey eyes glinting with a challenge. "Jealousy? Absurd," she said before Japp could ask, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I bested Harrington in the skies last year, fair and square. If anyone had a grudge, it was him." She crossed her arms, her posture relaxed but her gaze unwavering. Japp noted her confidence. Too much, perhaps. A rival scorned could be dangerous, especially one with Amelia's reputation for boldness. Jenkins, the butler, stood near the door, his gaunt frame rigid as a statue. His grey hair was neatly combed, his black suit immaculate despite the night's chaos. "I poured the champagne myself, sir," he said, his voice steady but low, as if reluctant to draw attention. "I assure you, nothing was amiss." Japp studied him. Loyalty was a fine trait, but servants often knew more than they let on. Jenkins' hands, clasped behind his back, betrayed a slight tremor. Was it fear or something deeper? Finally, Harold Bates, the journalist, leaned against a bookcase, his sharp features alight with a predatory curiosity. His notebook, ever present, lay open on the table beside him, already filled with hurried scrawls. "A scoop like this comes once in a lifetime," he said with a smirk, though his eyes flicked nervously to Japp. "But I swear, Inspector, I was only here for the story of Harrington's flight." Japp raised an eyebrow. Journalists had a knack for sniffing out secrets. Had Bates uncovered one worth killing for? Japp paced the room, his boots thudding softly on the Persian rug. "Motives aplenty," he said, almost to himself. "A wife with an inheritance to gain, a partner facing ruin, a rival with a score to settle, a butler with access, and a journalist who thrives on scandal." He paused, letting the words sink in, watching each face for a telltale flinch. Evelyn's handkerchief froze mid-dab. Langford's jaw tightened. Amelia's lips curled slightly. Jenkins' eyes dropped to the floor. Bates's pen scratched faster. The inspector turned to Willis. "We need a sharper mind for this one, lad. This isn't just murder. It's a performance, staged for maximum effect." He stepped to the telephone, its black receiver gleaming in the firelight, and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Hercule Poirot, please," he said when the operator connected him. "Tell him Japp needs his grey cells at Harrington Manor. Urgently." As Japp hung up, a gust of wind rattled the windows, sending a chill through the room. The suspects exchanged glances, some wary, others defiant. Evelyn's voice broke the silence, soft but piercing. "Who could do such a thing? Reginald was. He was everything to us." Her words hung in the air, unanswered as the fire crackled and popped. Japp studied her, noting the slight quiver in her voice. Was it grief, or a carefully rehearsed act? Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the panes like an impatient summons. The manor seemed to contract, its walls pressing inward as if to guard its secrets. Japp moved to the dining hall once more, examining the table. The champagne bottle, still half full, bore no trace of poison. Only Harrington's glass had been tainted. The killer had been precise, slipping the cyanide into the flute under the noses of a dozen witnesses. But how? And why now, at the height of Harrington's glory? Willis approached, holding a small evidence bag. "Sir, we found this near the sideboard, a cigarette butt, Langford's brand." Japp frowned. Planted, perhaps? Or carelessness? He pocketed the bag, his mind racing. The cigarette could be a clue, or a distraction. Red herrings abounded in cases like this, and Japp knew better than to chase them blindly. The constable hesitated, then added, "The maid mentioned seeing Lady Evelyn near the glasses before dinner. She was rearranging them, she said." Japp's eyes flicked to the drawing room, where Evelyn sat, her posture rigid. "Interesting," he murmured. "Keep that quiet for now." As the clock struck 7, its chimes echoing through the manor, a car's engine growled in the distance. Poirot was near. Japp felt a flicker of relief. His old friend's methodical mind would cut through the fog of deception like a beacon. But as the rain lashed harder and the suspect's eyes darted, Japp sensed the truth was buried deep. tangled in motives as complex as the manor's history. Who had turned the celebratory toast into a fatal one? The answer, like the mist outside, remained just out of reach, waiting for Poirot's arrival to pierce the shadows. Chapter 3. Poirot's Entrance. The morning mist clung stubbornly to Harrington Manor, its tendrils weaving through the ancient oaks that flanked the gravel drive, as if conspiring to shield the house's secrets. The rain had softened to a drizzle, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. Inside, the manor's grandeur seemed muted, its opulent halls dimmed by the pall of death. The dining room, where Captain Reginald Harrington had met his tragic end, remained cordoned off, its shattered champagne flute a silent accusation. The guests, now suspects, lingered in the drawing-room, their faces etched with unease, as the clock ticked toward the arrival of a mind capable of unravelling their tangled motives. A taxi's engine growled outside, cutting through the oppressive silence. Hercule Poirot stepped onto the drive, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the mud, his small egg-shaped head tilted with an air of quiet confidence. His three-piece suit, tailored to perfection, was as immaculate as his reputation, and his waxed moustache curled with precise symmetry. He paused, surveying the manor's ivy-clad facade, his green eyes glinting like polished jade. "A house of secrets, n'est-ce pas?" he murmured to himself, adjusting his Homburg hat. The drizzle beaded on his coat, but he seemed unperturbed, as if the elements themselves deferred to his authority. Inspector Japp met him at the door, his trench coat still damp, his expression a mixture of relief and exasperation. "Poirot, mon ami," he said, clapping the detective on the shoulder. "You're a sight for sore eyes. This one's a devil of a case, cyanide in the champagne, and every soul in that room has a reason to want Harrington dead." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "A toast turned tragic? Most intriguing, Japp. The method is clear, but the motive, that is the heart of the matter. Lead me to the scene, s'il vous plaît." Japp ushered Poirot into the dining hall, where the remnants of the fatal banquet lay untouched. The long mahogany table, still set with crystal and silver, gleamed under the chandeliers, though their light now seemed cold, casting stark shadows across the room. Harrington's place at the head was marked by the broken flute, its shards glittering like fallen stars. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the debris, his nose wrinkling at the faint almond-like scent of cyanide. "Swift and precise," he said softly. "The poison was in the glass, not the bottle, oui? A personal act, not a random one." Japp nodded, pointing to the coroner's report, administered moments before he drank. The killer was bold, slipped it in under a dozen pairs of eyes. Poirot rose, his gaze sweeping the room. The frescoed ceiling, with its cherubs soaring among clouds, seemed to mock the grounded tragedy below. He noted the positions of the chairs, the sideboard where Jenkins had poured the champagne, the windows rattled by the wind. "The stage is set," he mused, "but the players, they are the key. Who are these suspects, Japp?" The inspector briefed him. Lady Evelyn, the grieving widow; Victor Langford, the desperate business partner; Amelia Croft, the rival pilot; Jenkins, the loyal butler; and Harold Bates, the opportunistic journalist. "Motives as thick as this fog," Japp said, gesturing to the windows. "Money, jealousy, betrayal, take your pick." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then we shall begin with the widow, for in matters of the heart, the truth often hides behind tears. Arrange the interviews, mon ami, and let us see what the little grey cells uncover." Japp nodded, dispatching Willis to summon Lady Evelyn to the library, a quieter space lined with leather-bound tomes and portraits of stern Harrington ancestors. The fire in the grate crackled, casting flickering shadows across the room as Poirot settled into a high-backed chair, his hands folded neatly over his waistcoat. Lady Evelyn entered, her black lace dress rustling softly, her face pale beneath a veil that did little to conceal her red-rimmed eyes. She sat opposite Poirot, her posture rigid, her handkerchief clutched like a lifeline. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and tremulous, "I am at a loss. Reginald was everything. How could anyone do this?" Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing yet gentle. "My condolences, madame. But tell me, if you please, of the evening. The mood, the tensions. Nothing is too small for Hercule Poirot." Evelyn recounted the dinner, the guests' admiration for Reginald's transatlantic triumph, the clinking glasses, the jovial toasts. "He was radiant," she said, her voice catching. "But there were undercurrents. Victor argued with him earlier. Something about their seaplane venture. Reginald was firm, said changes were coming." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Changes, madam? Financial, perhaps?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. I don't know the details. Reginald kept business matters private." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And your marriage, madam? It was happy?" Evelyn's gaze flickered to the fire, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing. "Of course," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "Though his flights, they took him away often. I was alone sometimes." The admission hung in the air, heavy as the mist outside. Poirot noted it, his mind cataloguing the pause, the averted eyes. Was it loneliness or something more? As Evelyn spoke, a maid entered, her apron crisp despite the hour. She carried a silver tray with a folded note, her hands trembling slightly. "Found this in the hall, sir," she said, addressing Poirot. He took the note, his gloved fingers unfolding it with care. The words, scrawled in an unsteady hand, read, "Beware the widow's tears. They hide a lover's betrayal. Anonymous, unsigned." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Most curious," he said, slipping the note into his pocket. "A clue or a distraction? We shall see." He dismissed the maid with a nod, his mind already turning over the possibilities. Was this a genuine hint of an affair, or a red herring planted to mislead? He turned back to Evelyn, who had paled further. "You have seen this note, madam?" She shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, what does it say?" Poirot smiled faintly, his expression unreadable. "A trifle, perhaps. But Hercule Poirot does not dismiss trifles." He rose, pacing the room, his steps measured. "Tell me, madame, who stood closest to your husband during the toast?" Evelyn frowned, her brow furrowing. Victor was to his right, Amelia to his left. Jenkins poured the champagne, and Harold was scribbling in his notebook as always. Poirot nodded, his mind reconstructing the scene. The dining table, the clinking glasses, the moment of distraction. Someone had seized it to slip the poison. But who and how? The anonymous note suggested infidelity, pointing to Evelyn, yet her grief seemed genuine. Or was it, as the note implied, a performance? He glanced at the portrait above the fireplace. A stern-faced Harrington ancestor, his eyes seeming to judge the room. "The past watches the present," Poirot murmured, "and the present hides the truth." As he concluded the interview, thanking Evelyn with a courteous bow, a gust of wind rattled the library windows, sending a chill through the room. Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on the door through which Evelyn departed. "The heart of this mystery lies in the hearts of men and women," he said to Japp, who had lingered in the doorway. "We must probe deeper, mon ami. The note, the cyanide, the glances exchanged. These are pieces of a puzzle, but the picture is not yet clear." Japp scratched his chin. "You think the widow's hiding something?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "All are hiding something, Japp. The question is, what and why?" He adjusted his cuffs, his demeanour calm yet purposeful. "Let us proceed to the next suspect. The partner, Langford, I think. His financial distress may reveal more than tears." As they left the library, the manor's halls seemed to close in, the portrait's eyes following their steps. Outside, the drizzle continued, the mist swirling thicker, as if the house itself conspired to guard its secrets. Poirot's mind, however, was alight, his grey cells whirring like the propellers of Harrington's Sky Falcon. The anonymous note was a thread, fragile yet tantalizing. Was it a clue to Evelyn's motive, or a deliberate misdirection? The cyanide's precision pointed to opportunity, but the motive remained elusive. Langford's interview would come next, and with it, perhaps, another piece of the puzzle, or another shadow to deepen the enigma. The wind howled, a low moan that echoed through the manor's corridors, as if urging Poirot to hurry. Time was short, suspicions were mounting, and the truth, like the mist, remained just beyond reach. But Hercule Poirot, with his unerring logic and piercing insight, was undaunted. The stage was set, the players assembled, and the game of deduction had begun. Chapter 4. The Partner's Alibi. The morning light struggled through the heavy drapes of Harrington Manor's study, casting a muted glow across the room's polished oak panelling and shelves laden with aviation trophies. The air carried the faint scent of old leather and cigar smoke, a testament to the late Captain Reginald Harrington's presence, as if his spirit lingered among the relics of his triumphs. The study, with its deep armchairs and a desk cluttered with maps and blueprints, was a shrine to ambition. Ambition now cut short by a fatal sip of champagne. Hercule Poirot stood in the doorway, his small frame immaculate in a pinstriped suit, his moustache quivering slightly as he absorbed the scene. The drizzle outside pattered against the leaded windows, a soft counterpoint to the tension within. Inspector Japp, hovering nearby, gestured toward Victor Langford, who stood by the fireplace, a cigar in one hand and a nervous energy radiating from his portly frame. "This is Langford, Poirot," Japp said, his voice low. "Harrington's business partner. Says he was in the library during the toast, but I've got my doubts." Poirot's green eyes flickered with interest. "Doute, mon ami? Then let us test them. Monsieur Langford, if you please." He motioned to an armchair, his tone courteous but commanding, as if the room itself deferred to his authority. Langford sat heavily, his florid face flushed, his fingers fidgeting with the cigar. The firelight danced across his features, highlighting beads of sweat on his brow, despite the morning chill. "This is madness, Poirot," he began, his voice gruff. "Reginald and I had our differences, but murder? Preposterous." Poirot tilted his head, his gaze piercing. "Differences, monsieur? Of what nature, if I may ask?" Langford's eyes darted to the desk, where a stack of financial ledgers lay, their edges worn from frequent handling. "Money, of course," he admitted. "Our seaplane venture was bleeding funds. Reginald was reckless, spending on publicity stunts while I begged for restraint." Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug. "And yet you stood to lose much if the venture failed, oui?" Langford's jaw tightened. "Thousands. My savings, my reputation, all tied to that damned Sky Falcon project. But I didn't kill him." His voice rose, a note of desperation creeping in. Poirot paused, his fingers brushing the edge of a silver trophy engraved with Harrington's name. "You were seen arguing with him that afternoon, monsieur. A heated exchange, I am told. Perhaps a desperate act." Langford slammed his cigar into an ashtray, ash scattering like snow. "Yes, we argued. He wanted to dissolve the partnership, leave me with nothing. But I was in the library during the toast, alone, reading contracts. Check the staff. They'll confirm I wasn't near the dining room." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. The library, you say? Conveniently solitary. And yet the champagne bottle, handled by many, no? Your fingerprints, perhaps? Langford paled. I touched it earlier, yes, when we toasted in private. But so did others. Poirot moved to the dining room, beckoning Japp to follow. The table, still a frozen crime scene, held the remnants of the fatal toast. Poirot examined the champagne bottle, its label pristine, but smudged with faint prints. Many hands indeed, he murmured, his gloved fingers tracing the glass. But the poison was in the flute, not the bottle, a precise act requiring proximity. He turned back to Langford, who had followed reluctantly. Tell me, monsieur, this argument, what was its cause? Langford shifted, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. A telegram, he said at last. Reginald received it that morning. Said he was pulling out, redirecting funds to a solo venture. I'd be ruined. Poirot's eyebrows rose. A telegram? Most interesting. And where is this document? Langford hesitated, then pointed to the desk. In his papers, I suppose. Poirot rifled through the stack, his movements precise, until he produced a crumpled telegram. Funds reallocated. Partnership dissolved. R.H. The detective's eyes gleamed. A motive, monsieur. Ruin is a powerful spur. Langford protested, his voice rising. I was on the telephone with my solicitor during the toast. Check the records. London Exchange, 8:47 p.m. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. We shall verify, monsieur. But tell me, this solitude in the library, did anyone see you enter or leave? Langford faltered. The maid, perhaps. I don't recall. Poirot's smile was thin. Memory is a fickle thing, no? We shall see what others recall. As Poirot turned to leave, his eye caught a glint near the dining-room door. A cigarette butt, half crushed, bearing the gold-embossed logo of Langford's preferred brand. He knelt, lifting it with a handkerchief. Curieux, he said softly. Yours, monsieur. Langford's face reddened. I smoke everywhere, means nothing. Poirot pocketed the butt, his mind whirring. A clue or a plant? The manor's staff had been questioned, but none recalled seeing Langford in the library at the critical moment. The cigarette could be carelessness, or a deliberate misdirection. Japp, watching from the doorway, scratched his chin. Think he's our man, Poirot? The detective shook his head. Patience, mon ami. The truth is like a fine wine. It requires time to breathe. This cigarette, this telegram, they are threads, but the tapestry is incomplete. He glanced at the study's clock, its hands ticking toward noon. The drizzle outside had thickened, cloaking the manor in a veil of grey, as if the weather itself conspired to obscure the truth. Poirot returned to the study, his gaze lingering on the trophies. Each gleamed with Harrington's name, a reminder of the ambition that had fueled his rise and perhaps his fall. Monsieur Langford, he said, turning abruptly, you spoke of a private toast earlier. Where was this? Langford blinked, caught off guard. Here, in the study, before dinner. Just the two of us. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the glasses? Were they taken to the dining room? Langford shook his head. No, Jenkins cleared them. Fresh ones for the banquet, the detective's mind raced. If the glasses were cleared, the poison must have been placed during the banquet itself, narrowing the window of opportunity. Yet Langford's alibi, if verified, placed him elsewhere. Poirot paced, his steps measured, his grey cells weaving connections. The telegram suggested betrayal. The cigarette hinted at presence. But the alibi, if true, muddied the waters. Was Langford a desperate man driven to murder, or a pawn in a larger scheme? A knock interrupted his thoughts. Willis, the constable, entered, his face pale. Sir, we checked the phone records. Langford's call to his solicitor. It was logged, but brief. 2 minutes, ending at 8:49 p.m. Japp's eyes widened. The toast was at 8:50. Tight timing. Poirot nodded, his expression grave. Tight indeed, but possible, no? A swift act, a return to the library, feasible yet bold. Langford's face darkened. I tell you, I was nowhere near that glass. Poirot dismissed him with a wave, his mind already turning to the next suspect. We shall speak again, monsieur. For now, rest, but not too easily. As Langford exited, his shoulders slumped. Poirot turned to Japp. The cigarette, the telegram, the timing. These are pieces, but they do not yet fit. We must question the others, probe the cracks in their stories. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows as if urging haste. The manor's halls seemed to pulse with secrets, each shadow a potential clue. Poirot's gaze lingered on the cigarette butt, now safe in his handkerchief. Was it a careless discard, or a calculated plant to frame Langford? The telegram, too, raised questions. Had Harrington truly planned to dissolve the partnership? Or was it a fabrication to incite suspicion? As Poirot and Japp stepped into the corridor, a maid hurried past, her eyes averted. Poirot paused, noting her haste. The staff, Japp. They see all, yet say little. We must speak with Jenkins next. The butler, so close to the champagne, may hold the key. The drizzle continued, a soft patter that mirrored the rhythm of Poirot's thoughts. The puzzle was complex. The suspects entwined in a web of motives, money, betrayal, desperation. But Hercule Poirot, with his unerring logic, was undeterred. The truth, like the mist outside, would soon part to reveal its secrets. Or so he hoped. Chapter 5. The Rival's Challenge. The conservatory of Harrington Manor was a glass-walled sanctuary, its humid air thick with the scent of exotic blooms and damp earth, a stark contrast to the cold formality of the manor's other rooms. Orchids and ferns, brought back from Captain Reginald Harrington's far-flung expeditions, thrived under the misty panes, their vibrant greens and purples evoking jungles and distant skies. The drizzle outside pattered softly against the glass, a rhythmic counterpoint to the tension that hung in the air like a gathering storm. Hercule Poirot stepped into this verdant enclave, his polished shoes clicking on the tiled floor, his moustache quivering as he surveyed the scene. The conservatory, with its lush foliage and faint echoes of Harrington's adventures, seemed an apt stage for his next interview. With Amelia Croft, the rival pilot whose name had once rivaled Harrington's in the headlines. Inspector Japp trailed behind, his trench coat brushing against a fern, his expression weary. Amelia's a firebrand, Poirot, he warned, his voice low. Says she had no grudge worth killing over. But her rivalry with Harrington was no secret, and those gloves of hers, perfect for handling poison without leaving prints. Poirot's green eyes gleamed with interest. A rival, mon ami, is often driven by pride, a motive as potent as greed or love. Let us see what Mademoiselle Croft reveals. He adjusted his Homburg hat, his small frame radiating an authority that belied his stature, and gestured for Japp to summon the suspect. Amelia Croft appeared at the far end of the conservatory, her leather aviator's jacket a bold statement amid the delicate flora. Her bobbed hair framed a face of sharp angles, her grey eyes glinting with a defiance that seemed to challenge the very walls around her. She lit a cigarette with a flick of her lighter, the flame casting a brief glow across her features, and exhaled a plume of smoke that curled toward the glass ceiling. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice carrying the clipped confidence of one accustomed to cockpits and crowds, "I suppose you think I poisoned Harrington out of spite. Well, I didn't." She leaned against a wrought-iron table, her posture relaxed but her gaze unyielding. Poirot settled into a wicker chair, his hands folded neatly over his waistcoat. "Mademoiselle Croft, I think nothing yet, only observe. But tell me, if you please, of your history with the deceased. A rivalry, oui? And not a friendly one." Amelia's lips curled into a sardonic smile. Harrington was a showman, not a true pilot. All flash, no substance. I beat his transatlantic record last year, cleanly, fairly. He never forgave me for stealing his spotlight. She took another drag, the smoke swirling like the mist outside. Poirot's moustache twitched. And this? Resentment? It was mutual, none. I am told he sabotaged a sponsorship deal of yours. Amelia's eyes narrowed, a flicker of anger breaking her composure. Yes, he spread rumours, said my plane was faulty, scared off my backers, cost me thousands. But murder, she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. I fight my battles in the sky, not with poison. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. Yet you were at the table, mademoiselle, during the fatal toast. Your glass, was it untouched? Amelia's hand paused, the cigarette hovering near her lips. I didn't drink, she said. Water for me, I don't trust champagne at these affairs. Too many hands involved. Poirot noted her gloves, black leather, lying on the table beside her. And these gloves, mademoiselle, convenient perhaps for handling a vial of cyanide. Her laugh was louder now, almost mocking. You're reaching, Poirot. I wear them for flying, not poisoning. Check them. They're clean. Japp, standing by a potted palm, scribbled in his notebook, his eyes flicking to the gloves. Poirot rose, pacing the tiled floor, his steps measured. Let us reconstruct, then. You were invited to this dinner. Why? Amelia shrugged. Harrington called it a reconciliation. Balderdash. He wanted to gloat, show off his triumph. I came to show I wasn't intimidated. Poirot paused by a cluster of orchids, their petals glistening with moisture. And during the toast, where were you precisely? Amelia pointed to an imaginary table. Left of Harrington, next to Evelyn. Jenkins refilled my water just before the toast. Ask him. Japp nodded. The butler confirms it. Said he poured her water at 8:48, 2 minutes before Harrington collapsed. Poirot's eyebrows rose. A tight alibi, mademoiselle. Yet motives linger. This sabotage, did it provoke you to retaliate? Amelia stubbed out her cigarette, her movements deliberate. I tampered with his plane once. A loose bolt. Nothing dangerous. A prank to ruffle his feathers. But poison? That's not my style. Poirot's gaze drifted to the conservatory's glass walls, where the drizzle traced rivulets like tears. Style, mademoiselle, is revealing. But let us explore further. He excused himself briefly, stepping outside to the manor's garden, where a small shed stood among rose bushes, its door ajar. Inside, he found a vial, empty, labelled insecticide, with faint traces of cyanide residue. Curieux, he murmured, slipping it into a handkerchief. Amelia's hobby, he recalled, was gardening, a fact mentioned by the maid. Was this a clue or another red herring? Returning to the conservatory, Poirot held up the vial, his expression neutral. Mademoiselle, you are fond of gardening, oui? This was found in the shed. Amelia's eyes widened, then narrowed. That's not mine. Anyone could have planted it. Harrington's staff, his wife, even Langford. I haven't touched that shed in weeks. Her voice was steady, but her fingers twitched, betraying a flicker of unease. Poirot pocketed the vial, his mind whirring. The cyanide residue was damning, yet her alibi, confirmed by Jenkins, held firm. Was she a victim of a frame or a cunning orchestrator? He turned to Japp. The gloves, mon ami. Have them tested. And the vial. Its origins must be traced. Japp nodded, dispatching Willis to the task. Poirot faced Amelia again. One last question, mademoiselle. Did you see anyone near Harrington's glass before the toast? She hesitated, her gaze flicking to the floor. Evelyn was fussing with the table settings earlier. Said she was rearranging glasses. That's all I noticed. Poirot's smile was faint. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been illuminating. As Amelia exited, her jacket rustling, Poirot stood by the glass wall, watching the drizzle intensify into a steady rain. The conservatory's warmth felt stifling now. The exotic plants a reminder of Harrington's far-reaching ambition, and the rivalries it sparked. Japp approached, his notebook open. What do you make of her, Poirot? That vial's suspicious, but her alibi's solid. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Solid, perhaps, but not unbreakable. The vial is a thread. Whether it leads to Mademoiselle Croft or another, we shall see. He paced, his thoughts circling like the smoke from Amelia's cigarette. The rivalry was clear. Harrington's sabotage had wounded her pride and purse. Yet her confidence, her untouched glass, her confirmed alibi, were they too perfect? The vial in the shed pointed to her, but its discovery felt convenient, almost staged. A red herring, perhaps, to divert suspicion. Or was Amelia's boldness a mask for a colder calculation? The conservatory's glass rattled as thunder rumbled in the distance. A low growl that mirrored the storm brewing within the case. Poirot's gaze lingered on the orchids, their delicate beauty belying their resilience. Like Mademoiselle Croft, he murmured. Beautiful, yet tough. But is she a killer? He turned to Japp. We must speak with Jenkins next. The butler, so close to the champagne, may hold another piece of this puzzle. As they left the conservatory, the manor's halls seemed to whisper, their shadows lengthening in the dim light. The vial, the gloves, Amelia's defiance. They were fragments of a larger picture. One Poirot's grey cells were beginning to assemble. The rain outside grew heavier, a curtain of water obscuring the world beyond, much like the lies obscuring the truth within. But Hercule Poirot, with his relentless logic, was undaunted. The rival's challenge had been met, but the mystery deepened, its resolution as elusive as the mist that cloaked Harrington Manor. Chapter 6. The Butler's Confession. The pantry of Harrington Manor was a narrow, dimly lit space, its shelves lined with gleaming silverware and porcelain, each piece polished to a mirror-like sheen. The air carried the faint tang of metal polish, and the lingering warmth of the kitchen beyond, a stark contrast to the opulent chaos of the dining hall where Captain Reginald Harrington had met his end. The drizzle outside had settled into a steady rain, its rhythm a soft drum against the manor's stone walls, as if urging the secrets within to surface. Hercule Poirot stood in the doorway, his immaculate suit a splash of elegance against the utilitarian backdrop, his moustache quivering as he surveyed the room. The pantry, with its orderly rows of cutlery and crystal, was a butler's domain, a place of precision, but also of opportunity. Inspector Japp hovered nearby, his trench coat damp from a brief foray into the rain-soaked garden. Jenkins has been with the Harringtons for 20 years, he said, his voice low. Loyal as they come, but I don't trust that calm of his. He poured the champagne. Poirot had the perfect chance to slip in the cyanide. Poirot's green eyes glinted, his head tilting slightly. Loyalty, mon ami, is a mask that can hide many things. Let us see what lies beneath. He gestured to the butler, who stood at the far end of the pantry, polishing a silver tray with a cloth that trembled faintly in his hands. Jenkins was a gaunt figure, his grey hair neatly combed, his black suit pressed despite the night's turmoil. His face, lined with years of service, was impassive. but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as Poirot approached. "Monsieur Jenkins," Poirot began, his voice smooth yet piercing, "you are the heart of this household, no? The one who sees all, knows all, and yet a tragedy unfolds under your watch." He settled onto a stool, his hands folded neatly, his gaze unyielding. Jenkins paused, his cloth stilling on the tray. "I assure you, sir, I had no part in it," he said, his voice formal but hesitant, like a man choosing his words with care. Poirot leaned forward, his moustache twitching. "You poured the champagne, oui? Each glass filled with precision, as is your habit. Tell me, how does a poison find its way into one glass, Captain Harrington's, under your watchful eye?" Jenkins' hands resumed their polishing, the motion mechanical. "I fetched the bottles from the cellar, sir. Dom Perignon, as Sir Reginald preferred. I filled the flutes myself, all equal, nothing amiss. I swear it." His voice was steady, but his fingers tightened on the cloth, betraying a crack in his composure. Poirot rose, pacing the narrow space, his polished shoes clicking on the stone floor. A mistake, perhaps, or an opportunity seized. He paused by a rack of crystal flutes, noting an anomaly. One glass, set apart, bore a faint smudge, as if handled carelessly. "This flute, monsieur, it was not used. For whom was it intended?" Jenkins faltered, his eyes dropping to the tray. "A mistake, sir. I set out an extra by habit. It was removed before the toast." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "A mistake, you say? Most curious for a man of your precision." The detective's gaze softened, but his questions grew sharper. "Tell me, Monsieur Jenkins, of your master. Was he a kind employer?" Jenkins hesitated, his cloth slowing. "Sir Reginald was generous but strict. He discovered my difficulties recently." Poirot's head tilted. "Difficulties? Of what nature?" The butler's face tightened, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Gambling debts, sir. I owed a sum to a bookmaker, more than I could repay. Sir Reginald threatened to dismiss me if I didn't settle it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A motive, perhaps. A man facing ruin might act in desperation." Jenkins shook his head vehemently. "No, sir, I'd never harm him. He gave me a chance to make it right." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And yet, debts can drive men to dark deeds. Tell me, did you overhear anything that evening? Conversations? Tensions?" Jenkins' hands stilled completely, his gaze fixed on the tray. "I heard rumours, sir, about Lady Evelyn. Whispers of an indiscretion." Poirot's moustache quivered. "An indiscretion? With whom?" Jenkins swallowed, his voice barely audible. "I cannot say for certain, sir, but Sir Reginald mentioned his will. Said if Lady Evelyn were unfaithful, she'd lose her inheritance." The words hung in the air, heavy as the rain outside. Poirot's mind raced, connecting this revelation to the anonymous note found earlier. "Beware the widow's tears. They hide a lover's betrayal." Was Jenkins confirming a motive for Evelyn, or deflecting suspicion from himself? Japp, leaning against the doorframe, scribbled in his notebook. "That's a tidy motive for the widow," he muttered. Poirot held up a hand, his gaze still on Jenkins. "One moment, mon ami. Monsieur Jenkins, you served the champagne. Did you see anyone near the glasses before the toast?" The butler's eyes flickered, a momentary hesitation. Lady Evelyn was arranging the table settings earlier, sir, and Mr. Langford, he lingered near the sideboard before dinner." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. "And you, monsieur, where were you when the toast was raised?" Jenkins straightened, at the sideboard, refilling Mademoiselle Croft's water as she requested. Poirot paced again, his thoughts whirring like the propellers of Harrington's Sky Falcon. The extra flute, the debts, the rumours of infidelity, each was a thread in a tangled web. He paused, his gaze falling on a small locked box beneath the pantry shelves, half hidden by a stack of linens. "What is this, monsieur?" he asked, pointing. Jenkins flushed, his hands trembling anew. "My personal effects, sir. Nothing of importance." Poirot's smile was thin. "In a murder, monsieur, everything is of importance. Open it, s'il vous plaît." With visible reluctance, Jenkins produced a key and unlocked the box. Inside, Poirot found a ledger, its pages filled with scrawled figures, debts, payments, and a name. Harold Bates, the journalist. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his eyes scanning the entries. "You owed money to Monsieur Bates. A journalist with a hold over you. Most intriguing." Jenkins' face crumpled. "He lent me funds to cover my debts, sir, but demanded repayment with interest. I paid what I could." Japp's eyes widened. "Blackmail, Poirot! Bates could have pressed him to act." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Or perhaps, mon ami, the butler is a convenient scapegoat. This ledger, it is a clue, but to what? A desperate servant or a journalist pulling strings?" He closed the box, his expression grave. "Merci, Monsieur Jenkins. You have been most helpful, perhaps more than you know." As Jenkins resumed his polishing, his hands shaking visibly, Poirot stepped into the corridor with Japp. The rain outside had intensified, a steady drum that echoed the mounting tension within. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" Japp asked, his voice low. "The butler's in deep, debts, access to the champagne, and those rumours about Evelyn." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Indeed, but the pieces do not yet fit. The extra flute, the ledger, the whispers of betrayal. They are threads, but the tapestry is incomplete." He paused, his gaze drifting to the dining room, where the shattered flute still lay. "The poison was precise, Japp, placed in one glass only. Jenkins had opportunity, but motive? Desperation, perhaps, or coercion? We must verify this debt to Bates." Japp nodded, dispatching Willis to check the journalist's movements. Poirot's mind turned to the anonymous note, the vial in the shed, the cigarette butt, all fragments of a puzzle that refused to cohere. Was Jenkins a loyal servant, driven to betrayal, or a pawn in a larger scheme? The manor's halls seemed to close in, their shadows deepening as the rain lashed the windows. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his demeanour calm yet purposeful. "We must speak with Monsieur Bates next," he said. "The journalist, with his pen and his secrets, may hold the key to this web." As they moved toward the billiard room, a distant thunderclap shook the air, a portent of the storm within and without. The butler's confession had cracked open a door, but the truth remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of Harrington Manor. Hercule Poirot, with his relentless grey cells, pressed on, undeterred by the gathering darkness. Chapter 7. The Journalist's Angle. The billiard room of Harrington Manor was a haven of masculine elegance, its dark wood panelling and green baize table illuminated by the flickering glow of a single chandelier. The air carried the faint scent of cigar smoke and polished oak, mingling with the damp chill seeping through the windows, where the rain now fell in relentless sheets. The storm outside mirrored the growing tension within, as if the manor itself sensed the unravelling of its secrets. Hercule Poirot stepped into the room, his polished shoes silent on the thick Persian rug, his moustache quivering with the anticipation of a new thread in the intricate tapestry of Captain Reginald Harrington's murder. The billiard balls, neatly racked, gleamed like silent witnesses to the drama unfolding around them. Inspector Japp followed, his trench coat slung over one arm, his face etched with the weariness of a man wading through a mire of motives. "Harold Bates is our man now, Poirot," he said, his voice low but urgent. "A journalist with a nose for scandal. Too convenient he was here when Harrington dropped dead. And that ledger from Jenkins? Bates was squeezing him for money." Poirot's green eyes glinted, his head tilting slightly. "A journalist, mon ami, is a collector of secrets. Some he shares, some he keeps. Let us see what Monsieur Bates reveals." He gestured toward the figure lounging against the billiard table, a cue in one hand and a sly grin on his lips. Harold Bates was a lean man, his sharp features accentuated by slicked-back hair and a pencil-thin moustache that seemed to mimic Poirot's own, though less refined. His tweed suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, as if he thrived on the chaos of the moment. His notebook, ever present, lay open on the table, its pages filled with hurried scrawls that hinted at stories yet to break. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice smooth with a hint of mockery, "I'm just the messenger here, come for the story of Harrington's flight, stayed for the tragedy. Quite a scoop, wouldn't you say?" He tapped his cue against the table, the clack echoing in the quiet room. Poirot settled into a leather armchair, his hands folded neatly over his waistcoat. "A scoop, monsieur? Or something more? You were present when Captain Harrington fell, no? Tell me, what did you see?" Bates grinned, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of being questioned. A room full of toffs raising glasses, Harrington playing the hero. Then, bam! Down he went, clutching his throat. "Shocking, but I'm no murderer. I was scribbling notes, capturing the moment." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And yet you linger, monsieur, when most would flee." "Why?" Bates shrugged, his grin unwavering. "A story like this? It's gold. Harrington had enemies, plenty of them. I was digging for dirt, not adding to it." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Dirt, you say? And what did you uncover?" Bates reached into his jacket, producing a small envelope of photographs, which he slid across the table. "Take a look, Poirot. Harrington with a mystery woman, snapped last month in London. Not his wife. Juicy, eh? I was planning to confront him. Maybe squeeze a bit of cash for silence." Poirot examined the photographs, his gloved fingers handling them with care. The images showed Harrington smiling broadly, arm in arm with a woman whose face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. The setting, a dimly lit café, suggested secrecy. "Blackmail, monsieur?" Poirot asked, his voice soft but piercing. "A dangerous game." Bates laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "Not blackmail, just leverage. Harrington was a big name. Secrets like that sell papers." Poirot's eyes narrowed. And if he refused to pay? A motive, perhaps, for a more permanent solution? Bates' grin faltered, his hand tightening on the cue. "Now hold on. I was outside during the toast, taking photos of the manor for atmosphere. My camera's time-stamped. Check it." Japp, standing by the door, scribbled in his notebook. "We'll verify that, Bates," he said gruffly. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unyielding. "And your connection to Jenkins, monsieur? His ledger shows debts to you, significant sums. Were you pressing him, perhaps, to act on your behalf?" Bates's face flushed, his composure cracking. I lent him money, yes. The man's a gambler, in over his head. But I didn't make him poison anyone. Poirot rose, pacing the room, his steps measured. Let us reconstruct then. You were outside, you say, yet you saw the toast. From where? Bates pointed to a window overlooking the dining room. There, by the terrace. I was snapping shots through the glass. Got a perfect view of Harrington's collapse. Poirot moved to the window, his gaze tracing the line of sight. The dining table was visible, but the angle was oblique. Could Bates have slipped inside unnoticed? And the champagne glasses, monsieur. Did you see anyone tamper with them? Bates hesitated, his eyes flicking to the floor. Evelyn was fussing with them earlier, like Amelia said. Langford was near the sideboard too. That's all I saw. Poirot's mind whirred, cataloguing the details. The photographs suggested a scandal, a motive for Bates to pressure Harrington, or to silence him if the Aviator threatened exposure. The debt from Jenkins added another layer. Blackmail could drive a desperate man to desperate acts, yet Bates's alibi, if the timestamps held, placed him outside at the critical moment. Poirot paused by the billiard table, his fingers brushing a cue ball. "A game of angles, monsieur," he murmured. "And you play it well. But tell me, these photographs, did anyone else know of them?" Bates' grin returned, slyer now. "Maybe. I dropped a hint to Langford. Thought he might pay to keep it quiet, too. Businessmen hate scandal." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "And Lady Evelyn? Did she know?" Bates shrugged. "She might have suspected. Harrington wasn't exactly discreet." The detective's gaze sharpened. "You are a man who trades in secrets, monsieur. But secrets can be dangerous, no?" Bates' grin faded, his eyes narrowing. "I'm no killer, Poirot. Check my camera." As Poirot nodded, a maid entered, her apron crisp despite the late hour. She carried a folded piece of paper, her hands trembling slightly. "Found this in the billiard room, sir," she said, handing it to Poirot. He unfolded it, revealing a scrawled note in a hand similar to Bates'. "Amelia planned revenge. Check her gloves." Poirot's moustache quivered. "Another anonymous note," he said softly, slipping it into his pocket. "A pattern emerges, Jap. Someone wishes to direct our suspicions." Bates paled, his voice rising. "That's not mine. Anyone could have written it." Jap snorted. "Your handwriting's distinctive, Bates. We'll have it checked." Poirot held up a hand, his expression calm but firm. "Patience, mon ami. The note is a thread. Whether it leads to Monsieur Bates or another, we shall see." He turned back to Bates, his gaze piercing. "One last question, monsieur. You lent money to Jenkins. Did you know of his debts to others?" Bates hesitated, then nodded. "He mentioned a bookmaker, but I was his biggest creditor. He owed me hundreds." Poirot dismissed Bates with a courteous nod, his mind racing. The photographs, the note, the debt, they were pieces of a puzzle. But the picture remained elusive. Jap approached, his notebook open. "He's a slippery one, Poirot. Those photos give him a motive, and that note, trying to frame Amelia." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Or perhaps he is framed, mon ami. The truth is a chameleon. It changes with the light." As they left the billiard room, the rain lashed the windows, a fierce rhythm that echoed the storm within. Poirot paused in the corridor, his gaze lingering on a portrait of Harrington, his eyes seeming to follow them. The journalist sees much, Jap, but says little of himself. We must verify his alibi. And this note. He tapped his pocket, where the note rested beside the one implicating Evelyn. 2 anonymous accusations, 2 suspects targeted. Was Bates orchestrating a misdirection? Or was he a pawn in a larger game? The manor's halls seemed to pulse with secrets, their shadows deepening as the storm raged outside. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his demeanour calm yet purposeful. We must revisit the dining room, Jap. The scene of the crime holds more answers. As they moved toward the fatal tableau, a clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing like a warning. The journalist's angle had sharpened the mystery, but the truth remained hidden, a shadow among shadows. Hercule Poirot, with his relentless grey cells, pressed on, undeterred by the gathering darkness. Chapter 8. Threads Unravelling. The late morning light struggled through the heavy clouds enveloping Harrington Manor, casting a pallid glow across its ancient stone walls. The rain had relented to a drizzle, but the air remained thick with moisture, the mist curling around the manor like a conspirator guarding its secrets. Inside the dining hall, where Captain Reginald Harrington had met his tragic end, stood frozen in time, its shattered champagne flute and scattered chairs a testament to the chaos of that fatal toast. The chandeliers, once radiant, now cast long shadows, their light dimmed by the weight of suspicion that permeated the air. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the mahogany table, his small frame commanding despite the sombre setting, his moustache quivering as he pieced together the fragments of a puzzle that grew more intricate with each revelation. Inspector Japp, his trench coat slung over a chair, paced nearby, his face etched with frustration. "We've got motives up to our ears, Poirot," he said, his voice rough. "Evelyn's inheritance, Langford's ruin, Amelia's grudge, Jenkins' debts, Bates's blackmail. Yet we're no closer to pinning the killer." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his head tilting slightly. "Patience, mon ami. The truth is like a fine tapestry. Each thread must be examined before the pattern emerges. Let us return to the scene of the crime." He gestured to the table, where the remnants of the banquet lay untouched, the crystal flutes glinting like silent witnesses to murder. Poirot's mind was a whirl of clues. The anonymous note accusing Evelyn of infidelity, the cyanide-laced vial in the garden shed pointing to Amelia, the cigarette butt near the dining room implicating Langford, the ledger revealing Jenkins' debts to Bates, and the journalist's photographs hinting at a scandal. Each was a thread, but the weave remained elusive. He paced the dining room, his polished shoes silent on the parquet floor, reconstructing the fatal moment. "The toast," he murmured, "a collective act, yet only one glass was poisoned. The killer was bold, slipping cyanide into Captain Harrington's flute under a dozen watchful eyes. But how? He paused by the sideboard, where Jenkins had poured the champagne. The bottle was clean, oui? The poison was in the glass itself, applied moments before the sip." Japp nodded, pointing to the coroner's report. "Cyanide fast-acting. He was dead within seconds." Poirot's gaze swept the table, noting the positions marked by the police. Harrington at the head, Evelyn to his right, Amelia to his left, Langford beside Evelyn, Bates near the window, and Jenkins at the sideboard. "Opportunity," Poirot said softly, "requires proximity. Who could approach the glass unnoticed?" A maid's earlier statement echoed in his mind. Evelyn had been seen rearranging the glasses before dinner. Poirot knelt by Harrington's place, examining the shards of his flute. A faint residue clung to the rim, barely visible. "The poison was precise," he said, "applied to the glass, not the liquid. A subtle act, requiring a moment's distraction." Japp scratched his chin. "Evelyn's fussing with the glasses. Could she have done it?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Possible, mon ami, but too obvious. A red herring, perhaps, to divert us." He rose, moving to the study, where a new clue awaited. Among Harrington's papers, hidden in a locked drawer, Poirot found a diary, its leather cover worn from frequent handling. The entries detailed his triumphs, but the final pages were telling. Victor grows desperate, demands more funds. Evelyn distant, secrets in her eyes. Bates sniffing too close. A torn page caught Poirot's attention, its jagged edge suggesting recent removal. Mon Dieu, he murmured. A piece of the puzzle missing. Who took it and why? The diary hinted at betrayal. Evelyn and Langford, perhaps an affair, as the anonymous note suggested. But was it truth or another misdirection? Poirot returned to the dining room, summoning Japp and Willis. "We must verify alibis," he said, his voice firm. Monsieur Langford's telephone call, too brief, perhaps staged. Mademoiselle Croft's water refill, confirmed but convenient. Jenkins' debts, tied to Bates. And Bates' photographs, blackmail or a smokescreen. Japp dispatched Willis to recheck the phone records, while Poirot examined the sideboard. A napkin, overlooked by the police, bore a faint stain. Cyanide residue confirmed by a quick test. "Evelyn's napkin," Japp said, his eyes widening. "She was right beside him." Poirot shook his head. "Too convenient, mon ami. A planted clue meant to mislead." The detective's mind raced, weaving connections. The diary's torn page suggested someone feared exposure. The napkin implicated Evelyn, but its placement felt deliberate, like the vial in the shed or the cigarette butt near Langford. "A pattern," Poirot said, "of clues designed to point fingers. Someone orchestrates this chaos." He revisited the anonymous notes. One accusing Evelyn, another Amelia. "They are arrows, Japp, aimed to confuse. But the killer overplays their hand." A knock interrupted his thoughts. Willis returned, his face pale. "Sir, the phone records. Langford's call was logged, but it ended at 8:48, not 8:49 as he claimed. He could have reached the dining room in time." Poirot's eyes gleamed. A crack in the alibi. And Mademoiselle Croft's gloves. "Tested?" Willis nodded. "Clean, sir. No cyanide traces." Poirot's smile was thin. "As I suspected. The vial in the shed. A distraction, not evidence." He turned to Japp. "The diary, the napkin, the notes, they circle around betrayal. Let us speak with the maid again. She saw Evelyn near the glasses, oui? Perhaps she saw more." The maid, a nervous girl named Clara, was summoned. Trembling, she admitted seeing Bates linger near the sideboard before the toast, adjusting his camera. "He was fidgeting, sir, like he was waiting for something." Poirot's moustache quivered. "Fidgeting, you say? Most interesting." The detective paced, his grey cells whirring. Bates's photographs, Jenkins' debts, Evelyn's rumoured affair, Langford's financial ruin, Amelia's rivalry. Motives intertwined like the ivy outside. But the torn diary page nagged at him. "Someone removed a truth," he murmured. "A truth that threatens the killer." He requested a search of the suspects' rooms, focusing on Bates and Evelyn. In Bates's satchel, Willis found a crumpled note. Harrington's handwriting, a fragment of the missing page. Evelyn and Victor, plotting against me. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A motive confirmed, perhaps, or another plant to mislead. He turned to the dining room, reconstructing the toast once more. The killer needed a moment when all eyes were elsewhere. The clinking glasses, the raised flutes, a distraction perfect for a sleight of hand. He paused, his gaze falling on the chandelier, its prisms catching the light. Light and shadow, Japp. The killer hides in plain sight. As the drizzle outside thickened, a scream pierced the air. A maid, startled by a fallen vase in the hall, false alarm. But it sent hearts racing. The suspects' faces pale as they gathered in the doorway. Poirot's voice cut through the tension. "Mes amis, the threads unravel, but the knot remains. One among you wove this web. Soon it will entangle you." The scream had broken the manor's silence. But the true revelation was near. as palpable as the storm brewing outside. Who had torn the diary page? Who had placed the napkin? The answers lay just beyond reach. But Poirot's grey cells were closing in, undeterred by the shadows. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. The storm that had loomed over Harrington Manor all morning broke with a vengeance, its thunder rattling the ancient windows and casting jagged shadows across the drawing-room's velvet curtains. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and the faint crackle of the fire in the hearth, which did little to dispel the chill of suspicion that gripped the gathered suspects. The room, with its walnut-panelled walls and plush armchairs, felt like a stage set for a final act, the tension as palpable as the lightning flickering outside. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small frame commanding the space, his moustache quivering with the intensity of a mind nearing the solution to Captain Reginald Harrington's murder. The dining hall where the fatal toast had occurred lay just beyond, its shattered flute a silent reminder of the crime that bound them all. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his trench coat folded over one arm, his face a mixture of anticipation and exasperation. "This better be it, Poirot," he muttered, his voice low. "We've got clues piling up like leaves in this storm, but no killer yet." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his head tilting slightly. "Patience, mon ami. The threads of this tapestry are woven tight, but they unravel now. The killer cannot hide much longer." He turned to the suspects, seated in a tense semicircle. Lady Evelyn Harrington, her black lace dress stark against her pale face. Victor Langford, his florid cheeks flushed with unease. Amelia Croft, her leather jacket a defiant contrast to the room's elegance. Jenkins, the butler, rigid as a statue, and Harold Bates, his notebook clutched like a shield. Poirot raised a hand, his voice resonant yet measured. "Mes amis, the hour has come to confront the truth. A man is dead, poisoned in a moment of triumph. His champagne flute turned into a chalice of death. Each of you had motive, each had opportunity. Let us weave the threads together." The suspects shifted, their eyes darting. Evelyn's to the floor, Langford's to the window, Amelia's to Poirot, Jenkins to his hands, Bates's to his notebook. The storm outside roared, a fitting accompaniment to the drama unfolding within. Poirot paced, his polished shoes silent on the rug. First, the motives. "Madame Evelyn, your husband's will, altered to disinherit you if infidelity were proven. A powerful spur, no?" Evelyn gasped, her handkerchief trembling. "I loved Reginald. I'd never—" Poirot held up a hand. "Monsieur Langford, your partnership with the deceased was crumbling, your fortune at stake. Ruin is a cruel master." Langford's jaw tightened, his voice gruff. "I didn't kill him. I was on the phone." Poirot's gaze shifted. "Mademoiselle Croft, your rivalry with Harrington, his sabotage cost you dearly. Pride is a dangerous fuel." Amelia's eyes flashed. "I beat him in the skies, not with poison." Poirot continued, his voice rising with each accusation. "Monsieur Jenkins, your debts to a bookmaker and to Monsieur Bates placed you in a vice. Did desperation drive you?" Jenkins shook his head, his face ashen. "I served Sir Reginald faithfully." Poirot turned to Bates. "And you, monsieur, with your photographs of a scandal, your blackmail of Jenkins, greed, perhaps, turned deadly?" Bates' grin was strained. "I'm a journalist, not a murderer." The room crackled with tension, the thunder outside echoing their denials. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the group. Now the clues. An anonymous note accusing Madame Evelyn of betrayal, found in the hall. Another implicating Mademoiselle Croft, found in the billiard room. a cigarette butt near the dining room, Monsieur Langford's brand, a vial in the shed tied to Mademoiselle Croft's gardening, a ledger in Monsieur Jenkins' box, showing debts to Monsieur Bates, and a diary, Harrington's, its torn page hinting at a plot between Madame Evelyn and Monsieur Langford. Each suspect flinched, their faces a gallery of fear and defiance. He moved to the dining table, visible through the open door, and gestured to the shattered flute. The poison cyanide was in the glass, not the bottle, a precise act requiring a moment's distraction. The toast was the perfect cloak, glasses raised, eyes on Harrington. He turned to Evelyn. "Madame, you rearranged the glasses before dinner. A chance to tamper?" She shook her head, tears spilling. "I was only setting the table. Someone must have planted that napkin." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The napkin, oui, stained with cyanide residue. Yours, madame. Yet too obvious, no?" Japp interjected, holding up a report. "The phone records, Poirot. Langford's call ended at 8:48, giving him time to reach the dining room." Langford protested, his voice rising. "I was in the library." Poirot nodded. "And Mademoiselle Croft's gloves, clean despite the vial. Monsieur Jenkins' alibi, refilling water, confirmed. Monsieur Bates' photographs, time-stamped but manipulable." He paused, his gaze piercing. The clues circle, yet one detail emerges, the champagne cork. He produced the cork, retrieved from the dining room, its edge slightly discoloured. A tamper, subtle but present. The poison was applied to the glass rim, but the cork, handled by whom, bears traces. The suspects exchanged glances, their faces pale. "Jenkins poured," Evelyn said, her voice sharp. "He had the bottle." Jenkins stiffened. "I swear, sir, I only poured as instructed." Amelia pointed at Bates. "He was near the sideboard, fiddling with his camera." Bates scoffed. "You're grasping, Croft." Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "The cork, mes amis, suggests preparation. Someone handled it before the pour. Someone with access." His gaze lingered on Jenkins, then shifted to Bates. And the diary's torn page, found in Monsieur Bates's satchel. A fragment of truth or a plant to mislead? Bates paled, his notebook slipping. "That's not mine. Someone's framing me." The room fell silent, the storm's roar filling the void. Suddenly, a blackout plunged the drawing room into darkness, the candles flickering wildly. A gasp, a scuffle, a figure bolted toward the door. "Stop!" Japp shouted, lunging forward, but the shadow vanished into the corridor. The lights flickered back, revealing the suspects frozen, their faces a mix of shock and guilt. "Who ran?" Poirot demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. No one answered, their eyes darting accusingly. Poirot's moustache quivered, his mind racing. "The killer grows desperate," he said, his voice low but resonant. "This blackout, a distraction perhaps to conceal a final act." He turned to Japp. "Search the corridor, mon ami. The fugitive may have left a trace." Japp nodded, dispatching Willis. Poirot faced the suspects, his gaze unyielding. "The storm gathers, mes amis, but the truth will break through. One of you wove this web of deception. Your flight betrays you." The thunder cracked again, shaking the manor's foundations as if urging the revelation forward. The napkin, the cork, the diary page, all pointed to a calculated mind, orchestrating clues to mislead. Evelyn's tears, Langford's bluster, Amelia's defiance, Jenkins' rigidity, Bates's slyness, each was a mask. But whose hid the killer? The blackout had shifted the game, a desperate act that hinted at guilt. Poirot's grey cells whirred, piecing together the final threads. The resolution was near, as close as the lightning illuminating the manor's shadowed halls. But the killer's identity remained a shadow, fleeting and elusive. Chapter 10. The Unveiling. The storm over Harrington Manor raged on, its thunder reverberating through the drawing-room like the final notes of a tragic symphony. The restored lights cast a harsh glow on the suspects, their faces pale and taut, each a study in fear, defiance, or resignation. The air was heavy with the scent of damp velvet and smouldering coals in the hearth, the flickering flames reflecting the tension that gripped the room. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small frame a pillar of calm amid the chaos, his moustache quivering with the certainty of a mind that had unravelled the intricate web of Captain Reginald Harrington's murder. The dining hall, visible through the open door, remained a silent witness, its shattered champagne flute glinting like a broken promise. Inspector Japp, his trench coat now draped over a chair, stood by the door, his eyes fixed on Poirot. "This is it, isn't it, Poirot?" he said, his voice a mix of hope and exhaustion. "You've got the killer?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his head tilting slightly. "Oui, mon ami. The threads of this tapestry are woven, and the pattern is clear. The killer cannot hide from Hercule Poirot's grey cells." He turned to the suspects. Lady Evelyn Harrington, Victor Langford, Amelia Croft, Jenkins, and Harold Bates, seated in a tense semicircle, their gazes locked on him as if awaiting judgment. Poirot raised a hand, his voice resonant yet measured. "Mes amis, a man lies dead, poisoned in a moment of triumph. A single glass, laced with cyanide, turned a toast into tragedy. Each of you had motive, each had opportunity, but only one wove this web of deception." He paused, letting the silence stretch, the storm's rumble filling the void. "The murderer is Monsieur Harold Bates." A collective gasp echoed, the suspects' faces a gallery of shock. Bates's notebook slipped from his hands, his sharp features paling. "Nonsense," he cried, his voice cracking. "You've no proof." Poirot's smile was thin, his gaze unyielding. "Proof, monsieur? It is in the details, the little things you overlooked." He paced, his polished shoes silent on the rug, his hands gesturing with precision. "Let us unravel the threads. The poison, cyanide, was applied to the rim of Captain Harrington's glass, not the liquid, ensuring only he would die. A subtle act, requiring a moment's distraction during the toast. But how and why? He turned to the dining table visible through the door. The clues were many, yet misleading. The anonymous note accusing Madame Evelyn of infidelity, a distraction to cast suspicion. Another implicating Mademoiselle Croft, found in your billiard room, monsieur. Bates shook his head, his grin forced. "Planted. Someone's framing me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Planted, oui, but by whom?" The vial in the shed, tied to Mademoiselle Croft's gardening. Clean of prints, too convenient. The cigarette butt, Monsieur Langford's brand, carelessly left or deliberately placed. The napkin with cyanide residue, Madame Evelyn's, too obvious to be true. Poirot produced the diary page, found in Bates's satchel. "This, monsieur, was your error. A fragment of Harrington's diary. Evelyn and Victor, plotting against me. You tore it, hoping to incriminate them, but it was found in your possession." Bates's face flushed, his voice rising. "I found it! Someone slipped it into my bag." Poirot held up a hand. "Patience, monsieur. Let us consider your motive. You, a journalist, thrived on scandal. Your photographs, Harrington with a mystery woman, were leverage for blackmail. But Harrington, a proud man, threatened to expose you, no?" Bates gripped the armrests, his knuckles white. "I was outside photographing. My camera's time-stamped." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Time-stamped, oui, but manipulable. A clever trick. Set the camera's clock back. Snap a photo. Claim an alibi." But the maid saw you near the sideboard, fidgeting before the toast. You slipped the cyanide onto the glass rim, a swift act during the clinking of flutes. Japp interjected, holding up a report. The camera, Poirot. We checked. The internal clock was tampered with. Reset an hour earlier. Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on Bates. Your greed, monsieur, was your undoing. You lent money to Jenkins, pressing him for repayment, perhaps even threatening to expose his debts. The ledger confirms it, hundreds owed to you. When Harrington learned of your blackmail, he planned to ruin you. So you acted, ensuring his silence. Bates leapt to his feet, his voice shrill. Lies, you can't prove it. Poirot produced the champagne cork, its edge discoloured. This, monsieur, bears your fingerprint, faint but present. You handled it before Jenkins poured, applying cyanide to the cork's edge, knowing it would transfer to Harrington's glass. Japp's eyes widened. The cork? We missed that. Poirot's moustache twitched. A small thing, mon ami, but decisive. The residue matches the poison in the glass. Evelyn sobbed, her handkerchief pressed to her face. Harold, how could you? Langford's fists clenched, his voice gruff. You snake! You nearly ruined us all. Amelia's eyes flashed, her voice cold. Clever, Bates, but not clever enough. Jenkins remained silent, his face ashen, while Bates slumped back, his defiance crumbling. You've got it wrong, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Poirot paced, his voice rising with triumphant clarity. The red herrings were masterful, monsieur. The vial to frame Mademoiselle Croft, the note to implicate Madame Evelyn, the cigarette to point to Monsieur Langford. You wove a web to confuse, but the truth shines through. The diary page, the cork, the tampered camera. These betray you. He turned to Japp. Arrest him, mon ami. The case is closed. Japp stepped forward, handcuffs gleaming in the firelight. Harold Bates, you're under arrest for the murder of Reginald Harrington. Bates struggled briefly, his eyes wild, but Willis restrained him, leading him from the room. The storm outside thundered, a final crescendo as justice was served. Evelyn collapsed into her chair, her sobs mingling with relief. Langford exhaled, his shoulders slumping. Amelia lit a cigarette, her gaze distant. Jenkins bowed his head, his hands steady at last. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his demeanour calm, yet triumphant. The little grey cells, mes amis, they do not fail. A man's life was taken, but the truth restores order. He turned to Japp, a faint smile playing beneath his moustache. A complex case, mon ami, but the simplest motives, greed, fear, ambition, lie at its heart. Japp nodded, his exhaustion giving way to admiration. You've done it again, Poirot. I'd have chased those red herrings for weeks. As the suspects dispersed, the manor seemed to exhale, its oppressive air lifting with the resolution. The rain outside slowed, the storm's fury spent as dawn's first light pierced the clouds, casting a golden glow across the drawing-room. Poirot stepped to the window, gazing at the mist-draped hills. With the skies clear, he murmured, as does the truth. The puzzle was complete, the tapestry woven, and Harrington's fatal toast avenged. The manor's halls, once thick with shadows, now felt lighter. Their secrets laid bare. Evelyn's grief, though genuine, was tinged with relief. She would inherit, untainted by suspicion. Langford's venture was salvaged, his ruin averted. Amelia's pride remained intact. Her rivalry settled in the skies, not the courtroom. Jenkins, freed from Bates's grip, resumed his duties with quiet dignity. And Bates, the orchestrator of deception, faced justice, his pen silenced at last. Poirot turned to Jap, his voice soft. "We leave this house, mon ami, but its lessons remain. The human heart is a labyrinth, but reason finds the way." As they stepped into the corridor, the clock struck 1, its chimes echoing through the manor like a benediction. The storm had passed, the mystery solved, and Hercule Poirot, with his unmatched grey cells, walked into the dawn, leaving Harrington Manor to its ghosts.